Non ci fu pianto la mattina in cui la tempesta finì. Gli abitanti della città erano troppo sconvolti, o forse troppo induriti. Il dolore li aveva molati, bruniti fino a farli risplendere di esso. Cercarono con gli occhi il loro governatore. Non lo videro. Alcuni lo accusarono di essere fuggito con l'ultima diligenza. Come tutti i mercenari yankee era un codardo, dissero. Un gruppo si formò per andare alla residenza. A metà strada era già diventato una posse armata. Fecero un cappio con la corda della campana della chiesa saccheggiata, una benda per gli occhi, con un brandello dello stendardo a stelle e strisce che era sventolato fino a poco prima dall'architrave dell'ufficio postale. La tempesta non lo aveva strappato, i cittadini sì. Arrivarono sembrava addormentato, forse morto. Sui davanzali i ghiaccioli cominciavano a sciogliersi. Sembrava che le finestre stessero piangendo. Un nastro di fumo dal comignolo solitario. Sapevano che lui era dentro. Si rese ancora furibondi. Dietro la porta di metallo che era stata forgiata in una fonderia di St. Louis, pagata con le loro tasse, con il sudore della fronte, con le loro dita immerse in strazzi d'acqua alla ricerca di quella ghiaia luccicante che aveva portato qui molti di loro. E lui era al sicuro, come un lingotto nella camera di sicurezza di una banca, o credeva di esserlo, ma gliel'avrebbero fatta vedere. Qualcuno gli ruggì che si mostrasse. Non ebbe risposta. La folla si inferocì ancora di più, al modo delle folle inferocite, con gli scaltri che sobillavano gli ottusi inebriandoli d'odio e i deboli che, temendo per se stessi, strillavano più dei forti. Una donna urlò «Fifone!». Uno della Georgia alzò il grido ribelle. Altri simpatizzanti secessionisti gli risposero subito con quello stesso pauroso ululato volpino, una specie di gorgheggio incollerito che un tempo aveva significato l'insurrezione del Sud nato libero, ma ora significava umiliazione, conti rimasti in sospeso. La corda campanaria fu gettata sopra l'Ypsilon di un pioppo. Depredarono la bottega del fabbro. Qualcuno portò una rete piena d'attrezzi. Quando il primo suddista cominciò a battere alla porta, gli rispose una fucilata dalla finestra di una stanza di sopra. Fece a brandelli la coscia dell'uomo, che roteò all'indietro dalla veranda, tenendosi la ferita con le mani e gemendo. Più che altro sembrava sorpreso, come se non avesse mai sospettato che simili sconfinamenti potessero essere pericolosi. Altri 2 colpi in rapida successione. Uno scheggiò l'asta di bandiera piantata nella fanghiglia a cui era ridotto lo spiazzo davanti alla casa. Il secondo ammazzò una scrofa che si era accodata alla marmaglia e rodeva con frenesia topesca una macchia d'erbe gelate. Un'improvvisa ventata di neve, annebbiante, accecante. In quel momento apparve sul viottolo la cuoca del governatore. Una donna di meno di 30 anni, benché ne dimostrasse 10 in più. Era nata legale proprietà di un piantatore della costa del Golfo. A 19 anni gli aveva già partorito 3 dei suoi figli. Aveva sepolto un marito e tutti i figli prima di fuggire al nord di Frodo. Un terzetto di tipacci del Mississippi la guardò avvicinarsi. Comunemente ritenuti fratelli, anche se nessuno lo sapeva per certo, dicevano di non saperlo neppure loro. Il maggiore aveva chiome scarmigliate e gli occhi stralunati e scintillanti. Gli spiriti belli della città lo chiamavano Cristo. I suoi fratelli, più brutti d'aspetto e meno inclini alla spacconeria, erano noti nella colonia come Disma e Gesma, i ladroni crocifissi sul Calvario. Cristo allungò lo stivale per sgambettare la cuoca, che cadde con un sacco di patate. Mentre era lunga distesa nel fango, in assoluto silenzio, loro ghignavano e motteggiavano e le tiravano le vesti. Poi uno le premette un calcagno fra le scapole. Adesso te la insegno io l'emancipazione, berciò. Dalla casa detonarono 4 colpi, così rapidi che nessuno vide le fiamme. 2 aggressori perirono senza nemmeno accorgersi di essere stati colpiti. Cristo fu colto al ventre. Nessuno gli si avvicinò. Strisciò via rantolando, per morire almeno appartato, perché una pallottola nell'addome poteva significare una cosa soltanto. E lui sapeva, dall'esperienza fatta sui campi della morte di Gettysburg, che la cosa che significava sarebbe stata terribile. A certe morti ci si può accostare con una parvenza di coraggio. Non era una di quelle, e l'uomo del Mississippi lo capì. La folla rumoreggiò, avventandosi oltre il recinto del governatore. «Bruciamo il bastardo Yankee!» gridò un mulattiere. Una sequoia abbattuta fu spogliata dei rami per utilizzarne il tronco come ariete. L'armaiolo vi montò a cavalcioni, mozzando i tronchi col suo seghetto. Un texano brandì uno spaccaossa. Un daguerrotipista e il suo assistente zampettarono come pollastri nel viottolo e si diedero a montare precipitosamente la loro apparecchiatura, mentre le grida crescevano di violenza. Furono lanciati sassi, una pioggia di bottiglie. 2 cittadini spararono con le pistole al comignolo in mattoni della casa. Alcuni proiettili colpirono il segnavento, facendo girare il mietitore di rame e mandando il comignolo in frantumi. A quel punto i minatori presero le piccozze e alcuni tirarono fuori delle zappe. Il lampo al magnesio del fotografo fece il suo puff, sordo, occlusivo. Fu allora che tra i pennoni del tetto comparve il governatore, come un genio sprigionato dalla lampo della polvere. Appariva confuso, sfatto, come se si fosse appena svegliato. Il viso florido, era evidente che non si vedeva da giorni. Sembrava avvolto in un lenzuolo come un antico romano. Non aveva nessuna arma visibile. «Questa residenza è proprietà del governo federale», cominciò, ma con voce apprensiva, quasi che non gli andasse di parlare. Non sembrava impaurito, questo mai. Piuttosto meditava su qualche vicissitudine più gravosa di quella che ora prendeva forma ai suoi piedi. Maestosa indifferenza era il tono a cui aspirava, ma gli usciva più simile a disprezzo. «Ci sono qui i miei sceriffi. Tengo degli uomini presso le vostre case. Il primo che danneggia questa proprietà si ritrova alla dimora rasa al suolo». Queste affermazioni, almeno 2 delle quali tutti sapevano bugiarde, furono snocciolate in tono lapidario, come gli orari di un treno. «Prima mettiamo a posto la tua lurida negra», gridò uno. «Che ne dici?» Un manipolo di irriducibili lanciò un flebile urrà di sostegno. Il governatore aspettò che si spegnesse, poi parlò freddamente. «Non è ancora nato lo scovolo di latrina che minaccerà una donna a tiro del mio orecchio. Entra se hai coraggio, uscirai a piedi innanzi». «Bugiardo!» urlò un idiota. «Irlandese vigliacco!» Era prodigiosamente obeso, come un fienile munito di gambe, e nel campo di minatori che lui considerava casa sua andava celebre per essersi mangiato la punta di un dito, per scommessa. Adesso sogghignava a tutti quelli che aveva intorno in attesa del collettivo consenso. Quando esso non pervenne, si scappellò e iniziò a chiedere l'elemosina, un ritratto di quasi perfetta incoscienza. «Tornate alle vostre case», disse cupo il governatore. «Se mi minaccerete ancora, ammazzerò fino l'ultimo figlio di madre sua». Piovigginava. I cittadini si guardarono. Taluni, scuri in volto, presero ad allontanarsi alla spicciolata. era arrivato sulla scena un frate cattolico francese, giunto in città a cavallo dalla stazione indiana di Pagan Landing, ed esortava la folla a disperdersi, sussurrando ad alcuni, altri tirando per le maniche, altri ancora li assillava e redarguiva, come se fossero novizi indisciplinati, anziché pistoleri cresciuti sulle rive del Missouri. A un ragazzo sferrò un ceffone. La cuoca si alzò ginocchioni, si guardò i palmi delle mani e asciugò la fronte infangata con l'orlo della sottoveste. Lentamente si levò in piedi. Faceva tutto lentamente, come se il tempo e il suo corpo fossero lingue difficili. Nessuno degli astanti l'aiutò. Forse qualcuno avrebbe voluto, ma temeva. Le sputarono addosso e la derisero mentre avanzava barcollando verso la casa. La sua espressione nulla tradì. Non volle reagire anche quando lo sputo colpì la mantella inzaccherata aderendo in filamenti alle rughe del volto. Una fetida zola di sterco di maiale la colpì dietro la cuffia. Ci fu nella congrega chi rise d'imbarazzo o berciò, ma a tali umiliazioni alcune donne, forse disapprovando o solo forse per paura di restare, cominciarono ad allontanarsi in fretta, 2 a 3, raccogliendo i bambini sul cammino. E tuttavia la cuoca proseguì, ora dentro il cortile, salendo la scala tozza e malferma fino alla porta. Qui bussò e attese come era solita fare. Fu il governatore stesso a levare il catenaccio e aprire, non avendo altri domestici che badassero alle sue serrature. Buondì, Elizabeth Longstreet, disse il governatore. Buondì, signore, disse la cuoca. Sia gloria a Dio. L'idiota si avventò contro di lei tirando fuori un palanchino di sotto l'impermeabile. Il governatore estrasse una rivoltella e gli sparò al vento. Il vento diede un gemito. I cittadini fissarono la scena. Richard Stiles balzò indietro, mentre il ginocchio destro cedeva. Le spalle si afflosciavano pesanti, quasi che i muscoli fossero stati troncati, e stramazzò dagli scalini della veranda fra la ghiaia. Le sue mani si abbatterono al suolo come prosciutti. Il suo corpo era immenso. Un tempo la fiera aveva impersonato Atlante, il colosso. La sua caduta fu così pesante che fece sobbalzare il canelupo. Il sangue filtrò fuori del colletto di fustagno del gigante. Nella fotografia della sua salma, elefantina, grottesca, 2 monelli seduti a gambe incrociate sull'astrone del petto, il sangue appare una pozzanghera grigia. «C'è qualche altro stolto?» chiese con calma il governatore, e quando non gli venne risposta alcuna, ripeté le parole in un ruggito, e il suo grido schioccò come una frusta nell'aria fredda, tagliente, mescolandosi al rantolo distante del Cristo. L'ultimo dei suoi elettori si trascinò via nella fanghiglia, ritornando al cadavere della città. Ora si distingueva un preludio di disgelo, un gorgogliare nei fossati, plin, plin, e cicalio di gocce, un tuono protestò nei quadranti lontani. Gli animali fecero capolino dalle tane. Il governatore doveva essere turbato mentre ristette dietro i chiavistelli. Non per Stiles. Quello nessuno l'avrebbe pianto. Da tempo molestava le scolarette di Redemption Falls ed era sfuggita a un linciaggio solo in quanto amante di uno dei linciatori. Ciò che temeva era qualcos'altro e sarebbe arrivato a temerlo atrocemente. Nella sua vita si era insinuato l'inspiegabile. Era da solo quel mattino in casa, così aveva creduto. Ma non era stato lui a uccidere gli uomini del Mississippi. Joseph O'Connor.
Grazie. That was great.
Thank you.
Grazie. Words and silences. Reading Tennyson with my father. Sean, my father, was born in the liberties of Dublin, the city's oldest neighbourhood, an enclave of fierce autonomies, near the stern black cathedral in which Swift had thundered the gospel, near the slums of O'Casey, those rookeries of the broken, near the house on Usher's Island in which the family enjoys the dead are gathered in the hope of Epiphany. Dublin Castle, bastion of colonial power down all the long centuries, was a mule's ball from Francis Street, his childhood home and habitat. The Liffey flowed adjacently by Wood Quay on the forecourts, by the steeples of Christ Church and Adam and Eve's, a dirty, eddying watercourse serenaded by the seagulls and the calls of the bargemen through its mizzle and stench. Only 16 years before his birth, it had borne into history the last British garrison ever to guard Ireland's capital. The river that once brought them had taken them away under the conquering gaze of Michael Collins. Francis Street was a district of intertwining ideologies, where nationalism's pieties, if often acknowledged, were complicated by other more pressing realities into which one's patriotism had to be resolved. Pray and save was the dictum of Ireland at the time, slogan of a regime that favoured obedience above all other modes, as perhaps all post-revolutionary societies will. But Francis Street said more than its prayers. The liberties, aptly named a kind of independent republic, had its own web of fealties and ethics. It was a place of trade and commerce of one kind and another, small shops, dairies, rent collectors, corner boys, people who kept animals, survivors, adapters, with as many skeptics as true believers. Sean's mother, as a child, had seen the black bunting draped from the tenements, commemoration of those hundreds of her neighbours who had died for the king's shilling. From Bloemfontein and Speen Kop and Gallipoli and Ypres, from countless unpronounceable battlegrounds of empire and its desires, many sons of Francis Street had never returned. But their absence from the liberties was itself a kind of presence. It suggested allegiance was more complicated than you had been told. A heavy oaten aroma drifted up from the brewery, wrapping itself around his childhood, an intimation of large things being done, and the barges plied the river, bringing barrels of Guinness to the world he must have thought he would never see. The grid through which he moved had its landmarks and lighthouses: St. Nicholas of Myra Church, Francis Street School, Mead Street, the Coombe, Thomas Street, Cabman's Alley. And wider latitudes might be glimpsed in the neighbourhood's picture house and in the stories or the silences of relatives living close to him. A separated aunt, a grandmother who kept a butcher's, an old man whose quarters, beside Giovanni Rey's Italian ice cream parlour, had among their rudimentary furniture and general bric-a-brac a tombstone engraved with his name. But the map of his childhood had limits, not only geographical, and beyond those he rarely strayed. My father was born in the summer of 1938 to Eleanor O'Neill and Thomas O'Connor, Dubliners. In the early years of their marriage, they had tried their luck in Canada, but come quietly back to Dublin when their bravery had not been blessed. Their daughter had died in Montreal. Money was scarce. Kindly neighbours had assisted them homeward to Dublin with their children. Thus my father was born in the quarter of his ancestors, who had been living there before the empire ever began counting its subjects in censuses. A child of returned emigrants in the district of Swift, Perhaps he had a sense of the danger of Lilliputians. He would never be an emigrant himself. He grew up a bright-hearted, resourceful, grittily-minded boy, qualities respected by his mother, who I remember as a personification of them. The people who inherit nothing but their genes and their attitudes are always among the most courageous. She had managed a family business, a little butcher's shop in Francis Street, which provided no opulence but at least imparted a survival, a sense of one's possibilities in the world. His father, a cabinet maker, a man who believed in God, was stringent in authority in the way of fathers then. He had a vein of melancholia and fixed sometimes on his disappointments, as perhaps who would not, given the realities with which he had contended. I remember him as a kindly and mischievous grandfather, a chain smoker, a chuckler, a man who kept birds, and who told me in an era before Irishmen were much given to such avowals that he loved my grandmother and his children. But his parenting in its time had esteemed the straight and narrow, encouraged when necessary by physical punishment. He had been a rifleman, a sharpshooter at some point in his life, possibly for the old IRA, possibly for the local equivalent of the Home Guard. And whatever the facts of his one-time allegiances, you didn't want to find yourself in the crosshairs of his glance. Francis Street nowadays has bijou antique shops and restaurants, the cappuccino bars and trattorias and assiduously disheveled bistros that sprouted throughout the city during the now-dead era of the celebrated Celtic Tiger. Heroin can be bought in the alleyways that were once my father's roaming ground, and the drug trade has bought violence and blighted many lives. But the tourist in search of replenishment, culinary or cultural, rarely notices such subtexts. Immigrants have come to the area, bringing the vibrancy of new commitment. There are stores offering foodstuffs from Eastern Europe and Asia. There are African hairdressers, internet cafes. There are art galleries and pubs. And there is a theatre, the Tivoli, in which in 1994 a play of my own was performed. My brother Owen lives on Francis Street in a recently constructed apartment block which replaced the very tenement in which our father was born. And he daily walks the space where that baby was cradled as he crosses his living room floor. The area is frequently photographed for colour supplements about Dublin. Property values have soared. But in the years of Sean's infancy, it was a district of astonishing poverty. There were barefooted children, parents utterly beyond coping, whole families, usually large ones, in one-room flats, and there was a sense of the celestial irrelevance of the poor to the fantasies of the republic they lived in. In my father's class at school, there were 53 boys, of widely mixed ability and some of hardly any, all taught by an arts student in his very early 20s, Thomas Devan, a Christian brother. One morning, a boy was led into that classroom, so traumatized that he could not speak. He would be taken to an industrial school later that day, someone explained, because his mother had died and his father, with many children to feed, could no longer hold his family together. Shaking with incomprehension and what must have been fear, his tattered clothes filthy, his hair alive with lice, the child sat beside my father, the only classmate who would agree to be his neighbour for his last few hours of freedom. There has long been, as part of the Irish literary tradition, a mode of writing about poverty that purports to be real, but actually is a tributary of Victorian music hall with all that genre's concealments. The sentimental is only the savage with a painted-on smile, capering for its own exculpation. Dubliners are far from immune from its subtle seductions, as are Liverpudlians, East End Londoners, and pretty much anyone who ever breathed the stench of want. More pleasant, more absolving, less choking to face is the sepia-tinted slum of the poor but happy, where nobody robs their own and the good to their mothers, and the hard times are sweetened by side-splitting one-liners, and the wretched in the gutter are singing. It would not chime, I think, with the childhood of my father, nor with that of his deskmate that morning. Sean, a restless, questioning boy, had a facility for English composition. It was an ability fostered carefully by a number of his sisters, beautiful girls all, elegantly Hispanic of countenance, large-eyed, intelligent, a conspiratorial sorority. Such avidly hungry readers were those gorgeous young Dubliners that they would tear out the pages from whatever paperbacks could be afforded and share them around the kitchen like samizdat. A magazine, The Bell, containing short stories and verse, was often similarly shredded, and he availed of the destruction. He was a sort of child who enters contests, learns definitions, tells stories, gets sometimes into fights, remembers details and promises, believes the answer to almost anything can be found in a book, and is sometimes impatient as a wasp. I see him in my own sons, in my brothers and sisters, and I see him, as have others, in myself. But he was not to have the chances his grandchildren would know. A scholarship was offered him so that he could continue schooling into his early teens, an unheard-of notion for a boy of his place and time. His parents did their best, but they could not afford the loss of his wages. And so my father's childhood ended. He started work at the age of 12 in a Dublin engineer's office, located in one of those crumbling Georgian townhouses which still stand about the city looking mournful. Once inhabited by the well-to-do, many were sold when independence came, as their proprietors removed to more amenable locations, and some were simply abandoned to the weather. I find it haunting to think of him, a boy not yet old enough to shave, on his walk through the pre-dawn streets of his town, perhaps cold, certainly alone, past the chapels and the pawn shops, to that house of lost prosperities and cracked old plaster, where he would let himself in, the first to arrive, and build and light a fire against the damp. That is my picture of my father in childhood, a boy greatly loved, but alone in that house, his hand on its banisters, his footfalls on its floorboards, his body moving slowly through its spider webs and spectres as he waited for his life to begin. The smell of mattering finished, on the landings, on the staircase, and the stucco discolored by time. The knife-grey light of the Dublin dawn glimpsed through the bones of the fanlight over the door. Were there moments, I have wondered, when he imagined a future, a girl perhaps, a family of his own? If what Eliot says is correct, and we all feel what he means, that time past and time future are contained in time present, is it possible in some sense that I was already with my father as the coals smouldered lowly in the grate? Perhaps others were there too, of the past and the future. Perhaps my own children were there. What might be gleaned from books, this was always his interest as he worked to help support his family. It was a curiosity he shared with the girl who he would marry, who was complicated, eloquent, mercurial, gifted, a trainee dress designer, a reader. In a photograph I have of the two of them, clad as for an interview, they look like children dressing up, scrubbed and innocent as apples. And in truth as well as experience, they were little more than children, though by the time that photograph was taken, they had been working for some years. Together, they scrimped enough to place a deposit on a house in a district of Crumlin, an estate west of the city. It was on a row of pleasant dwellings called Lissadell Road, which had been named by some literato of urban development for the ancestral home of Yeats. They married in their early 20s, having never had any other romance, though both of them were so handsome that they must have had options. Their house was burgled while they were away on honeymoon. Not everything about Irish life was Yeatsian. And the honeymoon spent in Spain would see its own dramas. My father, in fact, almost died. Unable to swim, he ventured too deeply into the waves and found himself being swept away, but not by love. He was saved by a German tourist who was holidaying alone and who did not speak any English, but was master of the front crawl. My parents, alas, knew nothing of his language, so they sat on the beach for the remainder of the holiday, communicating with the German merman. How I wish he was called Herman. through smiles and mime and tracings in the sand and gestures of relieved reenactment. An unusual overture to married life, perhaps. But then many marriages are defined by their wordlessness in the end, by the thing not said, though felt. My father, back in Dublin, dived into his books. He studied endlessly at night, did exams, worked by day, learned geometry and draftsmanship and trigonometry and physics. In these he received grinds from the eminent Trinity College professor, Victor Graham, who insisted on accepting no payment. I mention that he was an Irish Protestant for no other reason than to record that the bigotries of Ireland, long clung to by some, have long been despised by others. A gentle, tweedy scholar, renowned in his field, he lived with his mother, his calculi, and a baby grand piano, and would frown with biblical gravitas as he imparted the 11th commandment, "Thou shalt not divide by zero." I was born in 1963, my parents' first child, and my second name is Victor, a nomenclative offering of gratitude. This was not a name I would mention tremendously often in the schoolyard, since its redolence of the Victorian tended to raise chuckling disbelief. But I find as I age that I feel honored to have it. It marked for my parents an extraordinary act of kindness, and I think in the early years of their life together that they saw it as an offering of all they had, an acknowledgement of thankfulness and joy. They moved to a larger house in the new suburb of Glenageary, 8 miles south of the city. It was a network of modern estates, a place that had recently enough been countryside. Many of the houses and roads were yet unfinished. There were footpaths without paving stones, walls without capstones, knolls of splattered pebble dash in the driveways and the gardens, where once had been cowpaths and loosestrife. In time, Sean qualified as an engineer, began a practice in Dublin, consisting, as I remember it, of my father and one secretary, who did the filing such as it was, and made tea and bought stationery and answered the telephone if it rang. It can't have rung often in the early weeks of the practice, but before long he was busy and then engulfed. Often, at the weekends, he would visit a building site someplace in the new suburbs, taking me with him as he compiled a report. We would wander those deserted hives of concrete and steel, making measurements among the brick ends and gutterings and flues, a battered yellow cement truck observing our wanderings, like Yahweh keeping watch on the faithful. And I remember doodling at his desk in his office while he worked, a comradely, companionable feeling between us, like the flow of underground water. Jobs were coming faster, the country was changing. Its younger politicians were easing out the old revolutionaries who had gunned the state into being. They were ambitious, tough, these mohair-clad arrivists, and they believed in the building trade as well as in themselves. My father, a political skeptic, worked longer, harder, in every county in Ireland, in the Republic and in the North, which latter in the late 60s was about to boil into carnage. But he went where the work was, as he always had since his childhood. In Francis Street, that's what you did. Churches, schools, office blocks, factories, they formed themselves on the drawing board he kept at the house. Often, when I went to bed, he would be working at that board, in shirt sleeves and tie, his restless eyes wearying. And often in the mornings, as I readied for school, he would be there again, measuring angles, drawing columns, so that it seemed to me, as it may have seemed to him, as though he had stood there working all night. He sang as he shaved, little nonsenses or Irish ballads, or the arias of Italian opera he had first heard sung by the man who owned the ice cream parlor in his Francis Street childhood. Che gelida manina, se la lasci riscaldar, cerca che giova, al bui non si trova. These were among the songs of my Irish childhood. E Luca van le stelle, o mio babbino caro, un bel dì, the return to Sorrento. And he asked me the irregular verbs of the Irish language as he drove me to school every day. By the end of the 1960s, he was father to 4 children. Glenageary was finally finished. Early in Ulster's troubles, there was a night when he was driving home from the north, and he stopped, exhausted, by the side of the road near the border town of Newry. He fell into a sleep, slumped over the steering wheel, and was awakened by the bawlings of a patrol of British soldiers who were probably not much older than my father. He was searched, pushed around a bit. It must have been terrifying. Their rifles were aimed. There were shouts and confusions. There had been a riot earlier. Newry was burning. I cannot imagine his thoughts as he was permitted to drive on, with the flames in his rear-view mirror. And still he worked on, up and down the roads of Ireland, through its vast new estates and its factories in the hinterlands, often driving many hours at the end of the day so that a ritual we had could be honored. Of such tender observances is fatherhood made. He would read to me a while before I slept. His taste was for the Victorian, those well-sprung poems and epics to which he'd been introduced by Thomas Devan in Francis Street School in the Liberties. And I can never read Tennyson without hearing my father's beautiful Dublin voice, its inflections and subtleties, its colour and hesitance, the soft Irish T in the way it pronounced shallot, and its peakings and fallings away. Calming as the burr of a cello on a rainy night, it was a voice that opened worlds, speaking of possibilities, of language, and the counterpane saw empires rise and slowly fall by the power of a father's solidarity. It was how I had learned to read, or certainly why I wanted to. His finger tracing capitals on a yellowed old page by the light of a lamp that was shaped like a toy soldier, bought by my parents on a London holiday. When they separated in 1976, I was aged 13. It was the year I attempted my first short story. I still have it somewhere in the house, and I take it out occasionally in the lunatic hope that age will have somehow improved it. But if time lacks the power to turn bitter wine sweet, it at least provides a perspective by which the vinegar may be judged. That I wanted to write at all, I owe to my father, to his stories, but more to his voice. The Mort d'Arthur from Tennyson's Idylls of the King tells the death of the patriarch and the fate of Excalibur in a version so strange and destabilizing and complex that only a child would understand it. King Arthur, fatally wounded, is dying near the lake and wishes to be rid of his sword. The false knight Bedivere cannot fling it away, despite his orders and the honor of his code. The poem circles around his reluctance, the humanity of his weakness, his lies, disobediences, evasions, justifications, before finally permitting him to walk into myth as the hero who did what he had to. It says the world is full of troubles, incomprehensible evils, wolves in sheep's clothing, lost battles, dead hopes, and all we have to counteract them is one another in the moment, and all else is gaudy illusion. Our beautiful trinkets, even those will be thrown from us, to be grasped by the brandishing hand of fate and drawn back to the depths they belong to. There is no destiny waiting, no preordained path to safety. It is only that those we love become that destiny. It is simply a matter of recognizing them. In that way, finally, it is a poem about fatherhood. For if Arthur is anything, he is father to the world, which will change despite everything he can do to protect it. And every father lives with the instant when his most treasured must depart. All the beauty and the hopes with which it is invested, flaring into a distance that can never be retraveled as it diminishes in time and space. There are trigonometries of the heart, and we are mute before their incalculability, for they speak of the constancy of that hand in the lake, which is ineluctably there, always waiting in silence for the moment when we are parted from what we burn to connect with. It is a poem about the interstellar solitude of being a father. In that sense, it is a poem about love. He will be 70 this year. He reads every day. He retired in 2002 from a working life of more than 50 years, during which he had been an engineer, then a barrister at law, an arbitrator of building disputes. He finished by assisting the structural design for the new wing of the National Gallery of Ireland, a stunningly gracious building he says he intends to haunt. I thought he would find it difficult to leave a working life behind, but he has never returned to the office and says he doesn't miss it. He reads poetry, criticism, short stories, the Old Testament. A lover of music since childhood, he is doing the theory exams. At family parties, or when he walks in the mountains, he sings the arias of his beloved Puccini or Verdi, the glories of bel canto opera. He travels a bit with my stepmother, a beautiful woman from Northern Ireland, with whom he has now lived more than 30 years. And a friend of mine, a lawyer with an office in the Liberties, tells me he has seen my father now and again going into a cafe on Francis Street, where he sits with a book, sometimes gazing out through the windows at the world that was once his boyhood. My eldest son, aged 7, has a look of my father as a child, and something of what I imagine to have been his outlook. He was recently in a school production of Dickens' A Christmas Carol, playing one of the hungry urchins so detested by Scrooge. Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? A role that required a costume of photogenic raggedness as well as a certain suspension of disbelief. It's great fun being poor, he chirped to me after the final rehearsal, dancing in his tatters, pointing gleefully to his patches, the perfect incognizance of a 7-year-old's laughter. I wish I could be poor all the time. I thought about my father at the age of my son, standing in Francis Street, perhaps with his mother, the ghosts of the past and the future all around them, with the gull song and the reek of the river. And I thought of the frightened boy, whose name I do not know, who had one day sat beside him in Francis Street's school, trembling in the certainty of his irrelevance. And other pictures too formed themselves in my mind, but some of them I pushed away. The performance was about to begin, and my son was nervous I would miss the start. A father has to do what he can. Announcements were made. The lights went down. The ghosts came and went, fluffing lines, missing cues, and the cameras clicked dutifully, and the videos rolled, and the teacher wrung her hands and chivied and beckoned as the children appeared from backstage. I was thinking, it was strange, of the first time I saw my son, the side of his face on an obstetrician's monitor, the shock of that moment, and the fierceness of his heartbeat as it filled that room in London. It sounded like joy, only wilder, more ardent. The moons of his eyes as he turned and rolled, an amniotic space creature, unimaginable. There were many times in my life when I was certain I would never be a father, and indeed did not wish to be, for the role was so frightening. Now that I am one, all the dreads have not disappeared. In truth, there are worse ones, as I suspect there always will be. But there isn't the time to consider them anymore, and anyway, it wouldn't be useful. Dickens, the sentimentalist, believed in the availability of redemption, even to the most twisted and crippled of men. His story of thwarted love turned to hatred of the world is far more complex than it seems. Its resonances sounded quietly through Dunleary Parish Hall, as my son and the other children masqueraded their hunger with the innocently solemn faces of those who will never know it. The audience was very small. There were rows of empty seats. But as he shuffled and grinned and spoke his few lines, the darkness around me seemed inhabited, watchful, closer than any of us imagines. Grazie.
On a rooftop in Brooklyn, strangers, some empires they're building, and you said something that I've never forgotten. We lean against railings, describing the colors and the smell of our homelands, acting like lovers. How do this here to this point of living? I held my breath, and you said something. And I am doing nothing wrong, riding in your car, your radio playing, we sing up to the hate floor, rooftop Manhattan, 1 in the morning, when you said something that I've never forgotten.